Was this morning in the neutral zone before the actual start of the race. The red jersey among several riders hitting the deck. What a way to start. One of the most anticipated days of this year's Vuelta with so much climbing, guys so anxious, and as a result, some top names crashing in the neutral zone area.
Yeah, Steve, one of the things about a crash in the until these guys make it back up into the peloton, but this is really a bad way to start the hardest mountain day they have seen so far.
Bart de Klerk for the Lotto Belisol team here among multiple riders who were forced to abandon crash.
And Bart de Klerk, one of the men we've seen riding very well in the mountains, just behind some of the winners of some of these early mountain stages, in a lot of pain.
He would look at his knee for quite a while, but eventually, after examination by the doctor, he would pull out. So frustrating. It's one thing to crash a 3-week Grand Tour, but to crash in the neutral zone when the race isn't even on, and then having to pull out, boy, what a way to end the Spanish Grand Tour.
And you can see with the problem with that leg, in one day of racing, legs around approximately 25,000 times, and the man is in tears as he pulls out of the race.
How do you wrap your head around that? Other riders getting attention out on the road after the crash.
That's Matthew Boucher, torn up on the elbow. Juan Antonio Flecha. Moreno back in the peloton finally.
So he seemed to be okay, made it back up into the field and is in the race today. And that battle will be fought today, the last of 3 straight mountaintop finishes, also the last stage before the at the Vuelta in 2013. And boy, it is a demanding day on the bike. Not early, but the beyond classification climb at the finish to really bring further definition to this general classification that's already been shaken up multiple times in the first week of racing.
And Steve, over the 116 miles, the Cat 1 hits 15%, but the final climb, 2 sections of 18 classification.
And now we are live with our breakaway that is 10 riders strong. The highest placed rider in the GC, Tomasz Marcinski, at 7:47 down. Part of this group that took a long time to come together and go up the road today. It took almost 60 kilometers before this move. The teams of the general classification leaders decided to let them go up the road. It's been a very active day, a very aggressive day of racing, highlighted by that crash we saw in the neutral zone at the start, featuring the red jersey of overall leader Daniel Moreno, who is back in the main field now, a field that trails our 10 leaders by
and Katusha on the front, but they are down a man from that early crash. Alberto Losada has pulled out of the race, been forced to abandon. That certainly hurts them, as every guy you lose means you have one less soldier to get the work done on a very demanding day like this.
Well, so much at stake on this stage, number 10.
15% grade is only a couple of kilometers from the finish line, Steve, so it's a perfect place for anybody who's got legs left at that point, if they've got someone else with them, to try and crack them.
Now the Category 1 climb summits with about 28 kilometers left to go in the stage. And then once they go down that climb, which is sort of technical and can be dangerous depending on the way they ride it, once you hit the bottom, that final climb starts right away, so there is no rest in between.
A wicked finale for today's race. 2 intermediate sprints right before the Category 1 climb. So it's all sort of packed together at the end. But even earlier today, the race was pretty hilly. It just didn't have categorized climbs per se.
And our 10-man breakaway now going through the second of the 2 intermediate sprints on the stage. So those are now in the bank, and all that's left are the 2 climbs inside the final 35 kilometers. Now today's stage overall, 187 kilometers heading south And in the general classification, the top 5 separated by half a minute. So it's not impossible that we could see another lead change by the end of the day. But given the way our new leader, Daniel Moreno, is climbing, judging by his form, you have to say he's a pretty good bet to hang on to the overall lead by the end of the day. Wouldn't you say?
I would say a pretty good bet. I have a feeling that Nicholas Roach, who is only 1 second down sitting in second place, will have a hard time challenging Moreno in today's finish. Vincenzo Nibali, he's sitting in third, down 19 seconds, and Valverde in fourth at 22. So maybe those guys will try an assault on the red jersey as well. And don't count out the American Chris Horner, 5th place, 28 seconds down. He wants it, but he's heavily marked after his earlier stage win in stage 3, and he knows now that they give him no leash.
The reason it took so long for this breakaway to get formed, almost 60 kilometers in today, is because everybody knew that coming in it was going to be a hard day. It was the stage before the rest day, so there was a good chance a breakaway could make it to the finish. So everybody wanted to be in the move. Multiple guys were trying. Earlier, we had a group of 21 riders who went off the front. That was too many. The GC teams brought it back, and then other guys started to go forward as well. As you see, 2 riders who have been kicked out of the race, Thomas DeHent and Andrew Fenn. We'll get to that in just a moment, but a lot of guys wanted to get in the move knowing that it had a chance to make it to the finish today, and that's why it just took so long for this 10-man group to form at the front of the race.
And so, yeah, it's just one of those days where it's incredibly aggressive and everybody wants to be in there. And it just takes that right combination of riders, but it also takes so much pressure from the riders that eventually the peloton can't hold them back anymore.
Oh, Wout Poels here. Number 211 for Vakant Soleil. Moving up through the field. And going back to DeHent and Fenn, they were kicked out of the race because apparently earlier in the stage they took an illegal tow from the car. We didn't see it. It was before we came on the air, but it was obviously serious enough to not only get some kind of a fine or a penalty, but to kick 2 riders out of the race because of that. I mean, they must have been holding on for a couple of miles, it seemed like. I mean, I don't know if I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's definitely fairly unusual to hear of guys being kicked out for holding on to the car. So it must have been fairly egregious, but as you mentioned, we don't really know. We're just getting the reports that they've been kicked out for towing, and we haven't seen the images of that nor heard of exactly how long they did hang on to the car. All
right, not wasting any time today. They are on the first of the 2 climbs here, the Alto de Monaquil. An 8.5 kilometer climb, averaging 7.5%. It will hit a maximum of 15%. Just about 5K into the climb, so roughly 3 kilometers from its summit. And the gap coming down. Our 10-man breakaway had a lead of over 5 minutes at one point, now down close to 2.5 with 36K left. Now this is very unusual to have so many race days and so many hard days in a Grand Tour before the first rest day. A lot of times it comes on the second Monday of the race, which would be today.
Well, and realize again that this is the 5th uphill finish of this race. So we've had 4 already that have been pretty selective, and this is day number 5 of 10 that have had a mountain at the end.
And with time bonuses, of course, at the finish line, 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3. We could see another change in the overall leadership. We could see some movement at the top of the general classification. The time bonuses were certainly the determining factor that moved the red jersey yesterday when Daniel Moreno won the stage, got the 10-second time bonus, and then took over from Nicholas Roach, the previous leader, now leading him by just 1 second here on day number 10.
Cancellara pacing Horner, Basso right there as well. Let's put this climb into context, Steve. 8.5 kilometers, it's just over 5 miles, but it goes up over 2,000 feet in those 5 miles. So this is a really rough climb. It may be short, but it's steep.
And these climbs today are much better for the man who we just saw on the screen a moment ago, Chris Horner, than the short, steep climb of the Valdepeñas de Jaén yesterday, which is where Moreno won.
Indeed, Chris is a guy who doesn't have that explosiveness for the really short climbs. He's a guy who likes that attrition type of climbing. and he's very suited for today's course. I'm very curious to see how he fares in the finale today. Roman Kreuziger out the back again. We saw that the other day as well. So he was right behind Chris Horner a little while ago, but look at him now. He's 23 minutes down in the general classification. He knows where he needs to be at the start of the climb. He just doesn't seem to have the legs for it.
Now other riders quickly dropping back here as the margin to the breakaway continues to drop. Just about a minute and a half. Matthew Boucher here, who has helped Horner on the climbs, been in a breakaway.
And this is Johan van Sumer in the Garmin Sharp Rider. And I think Boucher, really briefly, we got an image of him involved in that early crash today. Look at all the Argos men going out the back together here as well. Now they do have their teammate Georg Preidler in the breakaway, so he'll be flying the flag for them.
A lot of Radio Shack riders back here. So now once Cancellara drops off, Horner could be on his own today.
And definitely Zubeldia. Oh, this is not good. Zubeldia 189.
Only 110 back on the general classification.
And Zubeldia was kind of their backup plan there, and also a man that you would hope that would be there right in the finales to help out Chris Horner as well. Zubeldia, a multiple-time top 10 finisher overall in the Tour de France. He's a guy, he's not a flashy rider. He's always there sort of lurking with the guys that finish together at the top of the climb. And look at this, Fabian Cancellara. Look at the damage he is doing. Some major climbers going out the back with Spartacus on the front.
Do you think Cancellara expected to be the primary helper for Horner in the mountains like this? Because that's what it's turned into for the Radio Shack team the last several mountain days.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he thought that, but I can tell you one thing I'm thinking. With his sights set on the Road Worlds coming up after this Vuelta finishes, he's got to have a real legitimate shot at it. The problem for him is he will be so heavily marked, but he is so strong right now.
And these are our leaders. 9% in the slope. And back to the peloton of GC riders, a reduced main field now. Now the interesting thing about this climb, as we noted a short while ago when looking at the profile, if you drop off the pace here, once you go over the summit and then descend, you hit the bottom and the final climb starts right away. So there's not a lot of recovery time. If you lose contact here and lose substantial time, it may cost you the rest of the stage.
I agree, and even if you do make it back on, you're gonna not have any time to rest, and then when it starts pitching up for the final climb, you're just gonna get your ticket punched again. So we're seeing a major thinning of the peloton on this penultimate climb by Fabian Cancellara.
Now Basso is there in the green. Lack of teammates of several of the top general classification riders. Chris Horner only has Cancellara here. Basso, no teammates for Cannondale. Vincenzo Nibali of Astana, we've seen him be isolated at various points in the hills as well. So you're talking about some of the top names without strong team support here in the mountains this first week. Katusha as a team has still looked pretty strong. So has Movistar for Moreno and Rodriguez, and also Alejandro Valverde.
And so when you see the leaders of the teams get isolated with no teammates, well, then they have to bring back the attacks on the final climb, and they have to put their face in the wind, and that's when things really can unravel very quickly. I noticed at the back of the group, that's Vasil Kirienka going out the back. In the back of this group here, 4 of the Euskaltel men in the orange I saw just a moment ago. So that's a large number of guys from one team.
He's been in the move on more than one occasion so far in the first 10 days of the Spanish Grand Tour. Again, here is De La Cruz just off the front of this group. Now, 2 Movistar riders at the front, and here comes Valverde, who was at the back of this group, coming up to join his teammates. Chris Horner sitting just behind the Movistar riders for Radio Shack, and Basso right there as well.
Yeah, Valverde looks absolutely fine. I think he was just sitting on the back, taking it easy, not worrying much about things. Sylvester Schmid, the talented Pole on the front. He is a domestique, tailor-made for the mountains as he just rips along on the front of the group after Fabian Cancellara did so much work. There's Leopold Koenig, the man who just had his teammate De La Cruz going off the front in that jersey as the combined classification leader. And they're still thinning it out here. A lot of guys suffering.
The fatigue after 10 days of racing. All of the summit finishes, the hard stages in between, starting to manifest itself on stage 10 just ahead of the first rest day. Alejandro Valverde just 22 seconds down. He's been picking up chunks of time along the way. If he's at the front at the finish of this stage, he'd be a good bet for the win. What a lot of guys don't want to have to do is come to the finish line with Valverde, because among the top climbers and the general classification hopefuls, he's one of the best sprinters.
Yeah, indeed. He has got a combination of very important skills for bike racing. He can do a lot of different things. He's a great climber. He's an awesome finisher, and he time trials solidly, but he's a little bit inconsistent in the time trial.
And the individual time trial coming up after the rest day on Wednesday. Another opportunity to further sort out the general classification. So today and then Wednesday are really going to bring some clarity as we hit the midway point of the season's final Grand Tour shortly. To the front of the race right now, and things starting to split up from the original 10-man breakaway, so there are some riders in between, then that small peloton behind, but everybody getting much closer on time now. Just over 1 minute separating these groups, with just over 30 kilometers left to ride.
And Marcinski is a man on the front here who, as he was 13th, excuse me, last year in the 2012 edition. And also in 2011, he won the road and time trial championship of Poland. Hope for Italy to continue to develop into a Grand Tour contender. Won a stage of the Giro d'Italia back in 2011. That was his second pro win, and that's when everybody really put him on their radar.
And now a minute back down the road. Pareto and Moreno in the middle of this group. And to finish the thought on those two, the thing that I believe is going to make it really work for them is the fact that they're such good friends. They're roommates on the road. They train together. They've been riding together for several years. So even if they remain close on the top of the general classification, as we get a look at Sammy Sanchez also in this group, I think that you're not going to have that contentious relationship that could otherwise develop between two top rivals. Pareto and Moreno will be able to sort it out in an amicable way.
For sure. They're really good buddies. And Moreno, you know, he's got to be so happy with his race already. He's got 2 stage wins. He's in the overall lead. That's a massive success for him. And he's very happy to work for Pareto Rodriguez to win the overall if they can get into a position to do that. And likewise, Pareto knows that if Moreno is in a position to win, he's more than happy to help him do it. So it's a very enviable position. And with Zubeldia now getting dropped out of that lead peloton, Horner had a teammate who was high up there, and they were the only 2 teams, Radio Shack and Katusha, that had 2 guys that were high in the general classification. So it is a very enviable position to have 2 guys up high.
Diego Ulissi now the only man out front here on stage number 10. This is a small downhill section that's part of the climb. It will kick back up to the top at 27.8K from the finish. And now the field onto that downhill.
Martin Kohler being picked up from the breakaway there. 2-time national time trial champion of Switzerland last year and the year before. And there are fewer and fewer guys remaining from that original group of 10. Koenig here, look at this, he has come unhitched. You could see he was suffering.
Now, he was sick yesterday. He hasn't been feeling well. His team director said that he's been dealing with some kind of a bug, so this is not a huge surprise to see him.
Oh, and just feel for the guy. He's absolutely suffering, and you wonder, well, why isn't he just pedaling super hard on this downhill? It's because he's completely shot, and he needs that little bit of rest. So he just tucks for a second, sets up for the corners. If he takes some risks, maybe he'll get back on, but don't expect him to stay on the final climb. He's really looked like he's been in trouble for a while.
Ulissi, our leader, Marcinski, just a couple of pedal strokes behind, and then the Argos rider.
Yeah, it's Georg
in third
Breidler.
place right now, yeah.
Breidler trying to come back up as well.
All right, at the front of the heavy hitter group, two Movistar riders supporting the man in the green jersey, their teammate Alejandro Valverde. Chris Horner off his left shoulder. To Valverde's right, Ivan Basso. Jakob Fuglsang also there for Astana, the teammate of Vincenzo Nibali. Nibali is in the group, so is our overall leader Daniel Moreno and Joaquim Rodriguez. But back to the very front and coming to the summit of the Cat 1 climb, Diego Ulissi of Lampre.
And he's going to grab a little and head on down the mountain.
All right, so a tricky descent coming up. And once he gets to the bottom, the final climb starts pretty much right away. Gap still over 1 minute. Ulissi, the only man on the descent. Look how narrow it gets in spots. But another sunny, warm, dry day in southern Spain. Heat is baking the riders on the way up where it's so much more exposed. Summit in the distance for the peloton.
Well, and it does look like David de la Cruz, the NetApp man, is still off the front of that peloton as one rider had just gone over the KOM by himself. So he continues to soldier on in front of the group. All the general classification men looking pretty comfortable in this group, Steve. We saw Horner looking very comfortable. Valverde, Basso. Have not seen much of Moreno and Rodriguez.
Yeah, they've been in the middle of the group most of the way. Sammy Sanchez here, number 91 at the back, as the group goes over 1:15 behind Ulissi. So now they are on the descent. Just over 26 kilometers left to go, but a huge climb coming up at the end. Stage 10 of the Vuelta a Espana on Universal Sports, brought to you by Your Buds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop. This is our leader, Diego Ulissi of the Lampre team. And he's in this group that is at the front of the stage, but he's just been passed by, looks like, Tomasz Marcinski, who he had dropped on the climb. Ulissi was the first over the climb on the descent. Marcinski was several seconds behind, but Marcinski flying down the descent now, so he's just in front of Ulissi. And now this group of the general classification riders a little more than a minute back, also on the descent as well. Now with Movistar leading the charge, time for our Twitter question of the day for GoGo. Chris Freeborn asks, given the riding of Horner and everyone, do you think the best old rider competition and jersey? Well, to qualify that, we've heard that at the Vuelta, they've called it the Grand Tour of the Grandpas, basically, in Spain, because you have so many contenders who are in their mid-30s. In fact, 4 guys in the top 10 are in their mid-30s. Horner, the oldest rider in the race, at 41. So the old boys are making a mark. GoGo, what do you think?
Oh, boy. Boy, how do you say this respectfully? You know, it's interesting. As you age as a professional cyclist, everybody sticks a microphone in your face and says, well, how does it feel to be 41 and in the, you know, fighting for the overall? How does it feel to be 37 and riding so well? When are you going to retire? And the guys kind of get sick of that eventually. I think it's a fun question, but I certainly don't think we should add one.
Here's the answer, and this is the key to it happening. If they can find a sponsor for it, the race will do it.
Exactly.
If somebody will spend money for the jersey and the title, they'll do it. That's all that matters.
Well, and look at this race. They don't even have a best young. So it's every race kind of has their own thing. This race, they do the combination classification, which is general classification points and mountains, and whoever is the best in all 3 of those. So different races have different styles, but you got to admit there are a lot of guys older than 35 that are right up there in the general classification in this race, and one of those guys could win this race overall.
Now Tomasz Marcinski, the pole, now at the front, just ahead of Ulissi. And how about that view on the descent?
Marcinski absolutely ripping the descent, and usually Ulissi would jump right on that wheel and realize, hey, get together, get a little rest, get a little draft. But maybe Marcinski just taking a few too many risks for the Italian.
So the gap to the field of general classification hopefuls pretty much holding steady at just over 1 minute as we close in on the final 20 kilometers of stage number 10. These are the riders at the very front right now with 19 kilometers left to go. Steve Schlanger, Todd Gogulski, they are on the rapid descent of the Category 1 climb, the Alto de Monaquillo. Once they get to the bottom, they will basically start the final climb, a beyond classification ascent of the Alto de Hazayanes that's just about 16 kilometers long with a maximum slope of 18%. So that's what's remaining here in a very critical stage 10 before the first rest day tomorrow, with the general classification tight at the top. 5 guys separated by less than half a minute, and those 5 are all long-term hopefuls to wear the red jersey.
And Steve, at this point in the bike race, they have completed about 102 miles. So they are well into this race. Lots of time in the heat, lots of climbing. The 10th day of racing without a rest day. They'll certainly be earning that first rest day tomorrow.
Georg Preidler, the Austrian for Argos, here in the white. Coming up on the back of the pole, Tomasz Marcinski of Vacances Soleil. And he's going to go right by him on the descent. So the Argos rider, Preidler, is now at the front of the race with the final climb on the horizon. Closing in on the final dozen kilometers, all uphill, with, of course, the exception of the downhill in the middle and that slight downhill at the finish. But this is the defining climb of the day at the finish of stage 10, 187 kilometers altogether. So Movistar here in front. Alejandro Valverde in the green jersey has 3 teammates pacing him. Chris Horner without any teammates left. 3 Katusha riders, 2 of which are the race leader Daniel Moreno and Joaquim Rodriguez. And the 3 men at the very front right now. Tomasz Marcinski of Vacances Soleil in the yellow and blue. The pink and blue of Lampre, that's Diego Ulissi and Georg Preidler in the all-white for Argos Shimano. Their lead 112 on that group of the main field contenders.
Well, these guys don't look particularly like they're turning themselves inside out or anything. They're actually sharing bottles, as Marcinski there just got a drink from Ulissi. They're keeping a nice steady effort here. They know there's a lot more to come.
We are down to the final dozen kilometers of stage 10 at the Vuelta a Espana. 3 riders with a lead of just over 1 minute on the main field that is reduced in size and contains most of the top general classification riders. This is a beyond classification climb, 16 kilometers in length overall, 2 sections of 18% slope. That is the maximum grade on this climb. And these are our 3 leaders here. Georg Preidler, Tomasz Marcinski, and the man at the back, Diego Ulissi, calling for the team car, saying, hey, I just gave one of my bottles to one of my enemies. I need some help.
Help, help. I need help.
So Marcinski at the front, Preidler in the middle, Ulissi here at the back, and their lead starting to come down closer to the 1 minute mark right now.
Did you see that? His director flicked him. He didn't even give him a bottle. He just drove away.
And so is Marcinski. He's driving away right now as well.
I actually wonder why Ulissi spoke with his director and his director went up the road. Very curious if he's going to switch bikes potentially. If he's got some sort of mechanical incident and he wants to have the director ready on the side of the road, and then he can just get off his bike and immediately grab the new one. Very curious.
Sammy Sanchez in the orange and black of Euskaltel, number 91, a team that was set to disband, but now news that Formula One driver Fernando Alonso has purchased the team, and they're going to continue. We don't exactly know what the name of the team is going to be, but they're going to have a new base in Asturias, and they're going to continue one of the long-running teams, one of the signature squads in the sport. Was going to be sad to see them go, but now apparently they will continue under new ownership. And
sad to see this breakaway breaking up as well. But Steve, I want to just mention that that man was talking about actually sponsoring a team for the last few years. In fact, there were rumors a few years ago that Alberto Contador was going to lead up a team that he was going to put together. That never happened, but he's obviously kept a keen interest in the sport.
I've heard there's a little money in F1 racing, so no surprise to see him funding a cycling team now, as Marcinski is out solo at the front of the stage, dropping Preidler and Ulissi in the process.
Marcinski, the big news for him earlier this year is, well, just back not long, early August, he won the mountains classification at the Tour of Poland. So just about a month ago, he triumphed in that classification.
He was in the initial breakaway today of 10 riders. He passed Ulissi, who had been the leader on the descent to the Category 1 climb that they went over a short while ago. Now he's the leader on this final climb, the Hazianis. And other riders from the breakaway being picked up by the peloton as Marcinski rolls through the 10K to go banner.
All right, 3 more men from the early move being brought back. Corner just maybe getting a little bit brushed there by Juan Antonio Flecha. Guys looking different directions, grabbing bottles. You're going to need those bottles. You got to keep cool, keep hydrated here in all this sun exposure for this final climb.
Well, Gogo, I'm thinking that for Katusha, this could set up very well, because Joaquim Rodriguez hasn't really made any huge accelerations in this Vuelta. He's been sitting back. He's less than a minute off the lead. So what they could do, he could launch a move later on in this final climb. And if nobody can chase him, or nobody decides to chase him, hey, he makes up time on the general classification and furthers his long-term GC ambitions. If they do chase him, it could set up his teammate Daniel Moreno to counter that and maybe extend his lead as the red jersey holder at the top of the GC right now. So Katusha, I think, has a pretty decent situation going into this final climb.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that both Moreno and Rodriguez are a couple of the best finishers and climbers in the sport, and so it can go either way. Moreno could attack first and Rodriguez could follow and counter, or just like you said, the scenario where Rodriguez goes first. Either way, it puts them in the driver's seat for sure in the general classification.
Marcinski here at the front, turning left and right as the field goes through that downhill section midway through the climb. So picking up speed here, single file with Movistar still at the front. Alejandro Valverde, who has his teammates in front of him here at the front of this peloton, if he is with any riders at the front when they get to the top of this climb, it flattens out in the last kilometer, a little downhill at the finish. He would be tough to out sprint. And with a 10-second time bonus, he could continue to take back time as he works towards the top of the GC. And right now, they're all chasing this man, Tomasz Marcinski. And he is coming up on the steepest section where it'll hit 18% with 7 kilometers left to go, but that's just the first of 2 times it hits 18%. The second and final time will be in the last 2 kilometers of the race.
First, he's got to negotiate this very tricky descent, and this is a nice one to kind of be on your own on, but at the same time, sometimes it's nice to be in the field because you watch a few guys go through the corner in front of you, and you know if you need to scrub off a little bit more speed. But imagine this with 150 guys. They got to be happy that they've already thinned out, and here it's very steep.
All right, this is where it's going to get up to 18%.
And they lose all their momentum as they went over that bridge, and immediately 17%. And I'll tell you, it's steep for a long way through here. Yeah, there's a little bit of relief coming up, but then it pitches right back up to double digits for a long time.
Georg Preidler.
Marcinski has a good lead over Preidler.
And he's about to be picked up by the field at this point. Our leader, Marcinski, really trying to muscle his way up these steep pitches. Almost 20%. 7K to go for him. Preidler, who was at the front of the race earlier, is about to be swept up by the Movistar-led reduced main field. Watch how quickly they come by. Several switchbacks on some steep roads to negotiate here in the final 7 kilometers of racing.
Marcinski not won a race since 2011 when he went the TT and the Road National Champion of Poland among his other wins that year. He has picked up the mountains classification each of the last 2 years at the Tour of Poland, however.
To see if we're going to get a big move, a surge of some kind from the top general classification riders right here as they hit the 7K banner. Nothing yet.
Right now it's just this natural selection process of this attrition taking guys out the back under the pressure by Movistar on the front. There's nowhere to hide when it's this steep. Marcinski is up there once again in another really steep section as the field now, what's left of it, 17–18%, and Igor Antone once again going early on a climb.
Antone of the Euskaltel team, the first from this group to make a move. Antone almost 6 minutes down in the general classification.
Probably a little bit early to actually make a bid for a stage finish. He mentioned the other day as his teammate Sammy Sanchez struggling at the back there, number 91. He mentioned the other day that he didn't think he could match the accelerations of some of the riders, so he had to go early on these summit finishes and see if he could just build up a little bit of an advantage, and then maybe they'd come up to him, but they wouldn't have that pop left anymore.
Now down under a minute between this man Marcinski at the top of the screen and that small main field. With just about half a dozen K remaining. And that is the gap. Ulisi coming back.
Yep, just about to be absorbed. So we've got Horner there, we've got Basso there, we've got the green jersey of Valverde there.
Where's the red jersey? It's towards the back, it looks like. Moreno at the tail end of this group. Antone at the front. He peels off his colors of Astana. Joaquim Rodriguez is right behind him in the red and white. Ivan Basso is there, number 71, followed by number 1, Alejandro Valverde. And then Chris Horner, 184, the American for Radio Shack.
Full song, Nibali, Basso, Rodriguez, Valverde, Horner.
And there's the red jersey at 6K, coming off the back a little.
That's why he's not the team leader. Danny Moreno in trouble on this climb.
So we could definitely see a new leader by the end of the day. Remember, Moreno was leading Nicholas Roach by 1 second, Nibali by 19, Valverde by 22, and Horner by 28 seconds.
And I'm not seeing Roach in that group.
Marcinski still at the front, but the turning of the pedals has slowed. Fuglsang pacing Nibali at the front of this group. So Fuglsang followed by Nibali, Basso in the green, Joaquim Rodriguez the red and white, then Horner. Nicholas Roach is there in the polka dot jersey, the blue and white, King of the Mountains jersey. He's in the middle of this pack. And these are the riders who again have come off the back, including Sammy Sanchez, number 91.
Incredibly steep. This is the Colombian Sergio Henao, who is in trouble again. Yesterday it was Rigoberto Urán. Today it's Henao, the Colombian duo on having the race they want. One guy losing time one day, the next day the other.
And here they come behind Marcinski.
And through here, still well into the double digits. 15%, 13%, 17% throughout this part of the climb.
Looking over his shoulder, and he's about to be picked up. And look how small this group has gotten among the GC top riders with 5 kilometers left to go. The 10-man breakaway completely brought back now. This is the front of stage number 10.
Roach doing a great job to hang in there right on the wheel of Chris Horner through this 17% grade, and now Nibali starting to stretch some legs.
He's at the front. Fuglsang drops off the pace, so it's Nibali, Rodriguez, Basso, Horner, Valverde, Nicholas Roach there. And Daniel Moreno here. Boy, he's really struggling now. It looks like we're going to have a new man in the red jersey.
It sure does. And right now, well, now they've lost Nicholas Roach as well. He's just behind, though, so don't count him out yet.
Time bonuses at the finish. 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3 riders. Nibali, Basso, Rodriguez, and Horner are the first 4 right now, looking the best in this group.
And really, Steve, this is the part of the hill that is the most consistently tough, as a lot of separation starting to happen. And you know who's gone?
Valverde.
Valverde is also gone.
He's at the bottom of the screen in that green jersey, just behind Domenico Pozzovivo. A select group of 4 here.
Alejandro Valverde, shocking to see him dropped at this point.
How about Basso hanging in here? How good has he looked this week?
It's just been so impressive. Now, Valverde, don't count him out. He still may slug his way back up there. I never would have predicted we would see Valverde dropped and Basso leading the favorites.
Especially on a climb that didn't necessarily suit Basso like this. Really played more to the strengths of Rodriguez and Horner, but Basso's at the front right now with 4.5K left. As Valverde tries to make his way back up to that foursome, and so is Nicholas Roach. He's in the polka dot jersey at the back of this group as Valverde gets out of the saddle.
Now remember, Roach came in today 1 second down in the general classification on Moreno.
Chris Horner now to the front.
Oh, and he's opening a gap. The American has some legs.
He wore the red jersey earlier this week for just 1 day. After winning a stage in the opening days, Chris Horner then lost the red jersey. Now trying to take it back here on stage number 10, and he is opening up a margin here with 4.5K left.
Moreno suffering, losing the jersey, but Horner attacking the lead group with Basso, Nibali, and Rodriguez as he goes up the road.
Remember, a few days ago, Horner also launched a move on a climb, but they eventually caught him, and then he didn't have a second wind.
But
is today going to be different?
This, I think, is a very different day. That was a headwind day. Horner has opened the gap. Nibali is not letting him go. They are not going to give him any time because they realize what kind of form Horner is on at this point.
How much can they do about it right now? Look at this gap. Horner on the right, that group on the left. 4 kilometers left to go.
He maybe got the surprise win on stage number 3, which put him in that leader's jersey for a day, but he is fully on their radar screen now. And watch Chris, he doesn't sit down on these big efforts on the climb. He stands almost the entire way.
Right to left, Basso, Nibali, Valverde there.
Nicholas Roach has made it back.
So there in the red and white for Katusha, and Thibaut Pinot, the rider in the blue for FDJ. But this man, Daniel Moreno, it looks like losing his overall lead today on stage 10.
Yeah, he can kiss that jersey goodbye at this point. Really, to me, the question is, will Horner ride into the stage lead and take the jersey, or will Nicholas Roach somehow maintain his position with that group and take the jersey away if they catch Chris Horner?
Now Basso at the front, another surge. Valverde right there, Nibali, Rodriguez, and Pino in that order. Once again, putting the hurt on Nicholas Roach.
Nicholas Roach just having to ride within himself, go steady. Nibali coming off the attack of Basso. This one may actually stick.
2K to go for Horner. And again, the steepest part of the climb at 18% for the American. But Nibali finding an acceleration in his legs.
Oh, and he's got some gas right now. He finally got clear of the others, and he is charging hard.
The former Vuelta winner, this year's Giro d'Italia champion, and now Nibali trying to take back time on Horner, who's at the very front with under 2 kilometers left to go. I
think Nibali's going to blow himself out just a little bit here because he's going so incredibly hard trying to close down the gap to Horner. And when he hits that 18%, I don't think it's going to feel very good.
Now Nibali started the day 9 seconds ahead of Horner in the general classification. And right now, those two holding the top 2 time bonus positions on the road. Horner would get 10 seconds for the win. Nibali would get 6 seconds for second place if this were to hold. Is riding to his second stage win and his second stint in the red jersey of overall leader.
And this is a big lead in the general classification for Chris Horner.
Half a kilometer away now. Nibali trying to limit the damage. Trying to keep himself in contention because after the rest day tomorrow, the time trial on Wednesday could favor Nibali a little bit more, so he could take back some more time on Horner on stage number 11. But he wants to keep it close here today to make the time trial really count. But certainly a big shakeup in the overall general classification on this 10th consecutive day of racing at the season's final Grand Tour.
And how interesting it is to see these guys battling it out after they battled it out last year in Tirreno Adriatico. Horner led for several days. Nibali ended up winning the overall by only a handful of seconds, and Horner ended up second.
Chris Horner turned professional back in the mid-90s. And now after 4.5 hours of stage 10 at the Vuelta a Espana, he's pulling in to his second stage win and what looks like his second spell in the red jersey of overall leader.
There we go. He already has it 4 seconds ahead of Nibali, so he's moved into the red jersey. Nibali now just has to limit those losses. We have a massive battle shaping up here in the general classification between Chris Horner and Vincenzo Nibali.
Horner got the 10-second time bonus, plus whatever gap he ends up with. Nibali will get a 6-second time bonus for finishing second. Nibali accelerating with 2 kilometers left to go to break away from that small pack. He finishes a solo second, but 48 seconds behind Horner. And now here comes the other group that Nibali was with for a while, led by Valverde. Time bonus at stake here of 4 seconds for third. Valverde will get it, followed by Basso, Rodriguez, and Thibaut Pinot.
Big battle on this big mountain day.
There's Nicholas Roach, the king of the mountains, crossing over. And now we wait for the man who wore the red jersey as the day started, lost it on the road, Daniel Moreno. Igor Anton here crossing over with Domenico Pozzovivo next.
Moreno, we may be waiting for a while for him as he really was suffering pretty early on the climb.
What a day and what a week for Chris Horner. 2 stage wins, 2 times in the red jersey of overall race leader.
And within 2 months of his 42nd birthday to top it all off. And what a great climb it was by him today.
Now Nicholas Roach, along with Joaquin Rodriguez here at the finish. 2 riders for the Euskaltel squad. So Moreno spent 1 day in red. And now he gives it up to the American Chris Horner. The 10th day of racing, a fruitful one for Horner. Nibali in second by 52 seconds. Nobody else within a minute. Valverde, Basso, Rodriguez all outside of the 1 minute mark, with the rest day coming up tomorrow. Chris Horner without a contract for next year, and now he's the leader of the Spanish Grand Tour. It is the only individual race against the clock in this year's Vuelta, a time trial of 39 kilometers. And Chris Horner will be the last man on the course because he is the leader at the top of the standings, just about midway through the season's final Grand Tour, leading Nibali and Roach in the top 3 with some other marquee names right around the 2 minute mark, with still half of this Vuelta left to ride. From earlier, here is the route for today's individual TT.
Steve, a pretty straightforward route in terms of the technical aspects. You can see that they start and finish in the same town. That Category 3 climb halfway out, and wide open roads. It's really just a question of how hard they have to hit that climb. So that climb, about 2,000 feet of vertical from the start to the top of it, and a 24-mile event. So you really got to go very deep on the climb and then try and get a little recovery and hold on from there to the finish. Martin setting all the best marks when he was out there and making it look like he might be the man to beat. But the real question for me was, he's not as good a climber right now as Fabian Cancellara, and would the climbing of this course prove to be that which unseated him?
Now, that was one of those climbs where you wonder, okay, could he still get over it and have the best time? Because he can get over some of the hills. Obviously, he'd prefer an all-out flat time trial, but this is how he came up to the line.
And when I talked with him a few days ago, I asked him about this time trial, and he said he didn't know. He thought it might be too hard for him and the time trial specialist. Well, it ended up being just a little bit too tough for him for the climbing.
And then Fabian Cancellara. Didn't see much of him because he was so early, but boy, what a ride this was.
Cancellara besting Tony Martin's times. He didn't best him at the first time check. Originally, he started out just that teeny bit slower, but then he got the engine rolling. And that's the thing about Cancellara. He in the TT with the climbing in this one, I knew he was going to be very well suited, and then continued to power along very well on the first 18 kilometers of the course that were almost completely uphill, a few times getting out of his aero bars to opt to get in the wider position, but setting good times throughout the course.
So Nibali with a time of 52:25 would be enough, because behind him, American Chris Horner was losing time pretty much from the outset, it seemed like, to Nibali. He was behind at every time check.
And one of the first times and one of the only times Horner has been on his time trial bike this entire season. He knew he was going to lose time. It was just a question of how much. He played it safe on the descents. Didn't really risk anything in terms of a potential crash. It just did a solid ride for the general classification battle. Not a scorching ride by any stretch of the imagination, but kept it close enough, Steve, that that general classification battle is still completely up in the air.
Just trying to mitigate the time losses as best as possible. Horner would have the 20th best time on the day, just inside of 3 minutes behind the winner, Fabian Cancellara. But the big reference point would be Nibali and the other general classification riders.
Difference in these final summit finishes, and there are lots of them to come.
All right, the new general classification after stage 11. seconds behind the new leader, Vincenzo Nibali, tied on time with Alejandro Valverde. Nicolas Roche now in second. The 12th day at the season's final Grand Tour, and really at this point, 4 riders in numerical contention. Nibali, Roche, Valverde, and Horner separated by less than a minute on the general classification. The sprinters should fight it out, given the fact that they are running out of opportunities here at this year's Vuelta, and today's 164-kilometer effort taking the riders east in northeastern Spain over to the Mediterranean coast.
And a fairly straightforward day, but you do notice as they get close to the coast there, Steve, there is a Category 3 climb.
Just one climb along the way, midway through the course, but a rather tricky finale, which has become rather commonplace at this year's Vuelta.
Well, it wouldn't be fun if it weren't tricky, now would it? Now, those climbs look really severe on the profile, but they're really not all that tough, so don't think that this thing's going to be blown apart. Look for it to be a field sprint.
And we are now live with just over 77 kilometers left to go here on stage 12. This is the main field, and they are just over 5 minutes behind a breakaway of 3 riders that went clear right from the gun today. Their lead got up over 6 minutes at one point. It's come down by just about 1 minute, but things settle down at this point, and the team of overall race leader Vincenzo Nibali, the Espana squad, should be pretty happy where things sit at this particular point, because the 3 riders up the road, no threat on the general classification. Nibali's Espana squad can kind of sit back and let the sprinters team do the pacemaking now at the front of the peloton.
And indeed, the sprinters teams will do a lot of the pacemaking today. But as we talked about, guys reduced a little bit in their support. For instance, look at Caleb Fairley there, sitting in the second spot for Garmin Sharp. Well, that team has the sprinter Tyler Farah, who's one of the fastest guys in the race, but Coldo Fernandez, his main leadout man, broke his rib on the Stage 1 team time trial. He's out of the race. Another teammate, Michael Kretter, has been suffering from that crash, unable to really participate in the leadouts. And the teams just get worn down. They've lost Dan Martin. He crashed, finished a stage, but then really complained mightily and said it was too hectic, and he's out of the race. So a lot of teams are whittled down, just like Garmin Sharp is.
Our first look now at the breakaway, and out front in the green and white of Caja Rural is the 28-year-old from Uruguay, Fabricio Ferrari. Behind him, the rider in the blue for FDJ, the 26-year-old Frenchman Cedric Pinault, and the years of age, the Belgian Romain Zingel.
Now, these guys, Steve, way down on the general classification, and really no threat at all. To even stay away would be a minor miracle. Look at how much distance they have to go. Almost 77 kilometers with a 5-minute advantage. And so basically what's happening today is a lot of guys are sort of taking a little bit of a day off. You got 3 guys up the road. There's not a ton of horsepower. They don't have a huge gap. The field's not chasing that hard, so the race is actually slower today than projected by the organizers.
So what's at stake in stage number 12? Don't expect it to be much of a general classification battle today. Sprinters really running out of time to make it a field sprint finish today. They may not get another chance the rest of the way. And can someone surprise the sprinters in a breakaway, maybe a late stage attack? I think that's the most likely of the scenarios at stake today, upsetting the field sprint in some fashion.
Yeah, but as you mentioned just moments ago, you know, those sprinters are very hungry. They want an opportunity to get another one. And, you know, I spoke with the director, Neil, they were already into the race. And I said, look, you know, you've sort of shown your hand in these field sprints, but you've also said you're not going to do all the work. What's the plan today? And he said, absolutely. We are not going to ride on the front all day. We don't have the horsepower for that. If other teams want to help chase, we'll control it with several other teams, but don't expect to see Orica Green Edge up there all day riding for Michael Matthews.
So we are underway. Long way to go on stage number 12. 76 kilometers left on the road, but the time to the breakaway coming down now under 5 minutes on a sunny, warm day in northeastern Spain. The 2013 Vuelta a Espana on Universal Sports is presented by Earbuds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop. Well, as far as the general classification battle, you only have 4 riders who are really in contention at this point. Everybody else more than 2 minutes back. So when you look at the top, led by Nibali, followed by Nicholas Roach in second, Valverde in third, and Horner in fourth. We're into our 12th day now. Just under half the race remaining. Still 6 uphill finishes. At this point, I think things are going to play out from here.
I just felt this building the whole way.
Oh, it was
through.
building, brother.
Here he goes. He's all right. You want me to read the go-go crystal ball for you?
I want you to pull it out, peer into it, and use your clairvoyance to give me a sense of what to expect.
I think the battle right now is really, I think Nibali's in the driver's seat. He's very strong. He's climbing well. He's got a solid team. And, in fact, he may have a little bit more help in the mountains than Horner does. And we'll see about Valverde and Rodriguez. You know, it kind of changes day by day.
That being said, in the early mountains, first half of this race, Nibali has been isolated at various times, which has worked to Horner's advantage.
Well, everybody's been isolated. That's the thing. Like, at a certain point, everybody's been isolated in these mountain stages so far. And that's one of the things Horner and I were discussing on the rest day. He said, look, it's really going to come down to who's watching who amongst the favorites. And those guys that you just mentioned, Rodriguez, Horner, Basso, those guys continue to separate themselves from everybody else, and they come to the summit finishes the last few kilometers looking at each other. And so eventually it gets down to this point where they start attacking each other, and it becomes, well, who are you going to let go? And at a certain point, you just don't know. It's almost like you let go the guy that you think is the least dangerous of the group.
Well, from the 3-man breakaway, 2 of the riders here have separated themselves. They have lost Cedric Pino of the FDJ team. It's Romain Zingle of Cofidis in the red and Fabrizio Ferrari of Caja Rural here, with just over 70 kilometers left. The thing about the overall general classification is here at the Vuelta, it's not like the Tour de France where you always have one extremely strong team that control things in the mountains. You have teams that are pretty strong, but you're going to have a lot of guys who are going to be isolated. So you're going to have a lot of one-on-one battles going on at some point. So it's going to come down, as Chris Warner pointed out, to luck and tactics for those riders who want to win.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying too, and that's what makes this race very interesting. Is you get all the favorites separated from their teammates, and they start taking shots at each other. And eventually, somebody takes a shot after enough hard shots have happened, and they get away. And so we're really going to look tactically at this battle. It's not going to be attrition, I don't believe, that's going to settle this race in the general classification. It's going to be all the different attacks on the summit finish. And finally, they just let one guy go, because everybody in that group is riding very close to their limit. And if you attack and I'm trying to decide, well, I'm going to have somebody else chase you, Steve, and no one else chases, well, that may be the one that stays away.
All right, so this is Cedric Pino. So he apparently has dropped the other 2, Zingle and Ferrari. So he's now at the front of the race by himself as they went over the top of that climb. So you have Pino here out front, Zingle and Ferrari, who he was with on the road. Then the field is behind. Still separated by over 4 minutes at this point.
And I would not expect Pino to stay out here for a long time without them. I think he would be happy to have some company. They have got a long way to go.
And now they're starting to come back together, and that is Romain Zingle coming up to Pino, and following him Ferrari. So it's a 3-man breakaway once again here on stage 12. Now, Raqueze has been fast. And as far as other sprinters who have also shown their speed, Michael Matthews of Orica Green Edge, probably the fastest guy in the race right now. Tyler Farah has also been there in the top 3, but just missing out. It's always as if he needs another 20 meters or so to get to the front. He's just never been quite there to get the win. And in addition to Farah, Gianni Mearsman a bit off, not quite the fastest we've ever seen him.
He's got his teammate Andy Fenn as well, who could play a role in one of these sprints. I mean, the truth is that we really haven't seen one rider or one team that is clearly the best suited for a field sprint. So it's kind of a free-for-all, and we expect to continue to see it be a free-for-all.
And Ramon Sinkeldam, don't forget him for the Argos Shimano team as well, as we still have 2 intermediate sprints to go before we get to the finish. Those coming up at 25K to go to the finish, and then at 15K. And it looks like our 3-man breakaway will at least get to that first one to eat up the points and the time there without a battle from the field behind. But now the gap under a minute, so it may not be all that long before they are brought back entirely. Three and a half hours in on one of those stages that's kind of a transitional day, coming off the mountains this weekend. Mostly flat stage, and a chance for some riders to just kind of regroup, get back into the rhythm of the point-to-point road stage racing after a rest day on Tuesday, the time trial yesterday. Now getting back into the rhythm of the overall race today before it starts to heat up again on the penultimate weekend.
Today really is a good day to just sort of ease back into things. It's going to get a little bit more challenging tomorrow for stage number 13 with a pretty nasty category 1 climb that I think is going to whittle down the peloton a fair bit with a 16% maximum grade on it. It's close to the end. It's not going to vacation battle, but it's going to get rid of some sprinters. A little bit different, or let's try and do the exact same thing, because sometimes, contrary to popular belief, you could do the exact same thing multiple times, and sometimes it'll work in a bike race and sometimes it won't, because of all the other factors that are at play.
Now look at this gap really coming down now, almost just a dozen seconds with 20K left. It's so easy just to think it's about speed at the finish. How much does confidence come into play, winning or a lack of winning, that plays on your mind?
Absolutely huge. Coach, after he won a stage early in the race, he said it changed his entire mindset. Suddenly he started thinking he could actually win. Then he got into the jersey as the overall leader, and then he had even another burst. So now he is racing in the general classification for a podium spot, whereas before he said, I'll follow this group of favorites and I'll finish with them. But now he's thinking about attacking them, because he just did that a week ago and he won a stage.
And it seems like when you have the confidence, that you have that peace of mind and that sense of calm that you need, even within that chaos that is happening around you, the speed, the fury, the fight for position. If you let your mind get caught up in that chaos, it's going to be harder to get the win than if you're at peace with yourself and you can ride comfortably even though it's so frenetic around you.
No doubt. I mean, look at these guys, 5 seconds for them. Behind them, it is absolutely chaos in the bunch. And the field sprint guys, yeah, okay, this looks really easy. Well, it might be pretty safe if you're sitting in 4th or 5th wheel and it's single file. But if you're back there 20 positions and guys are coming around you, and as soon as they get their handlebars in front of you, they move over into you. And if their bars are in front of your bars, you're the guy who's going to fall down. So you have to back out. So you're constantly nosing your bike in front of the next guy. And I tell you, field sprinters are insane. The risks they take are pretty darn scary, and they just have to do that to do their craft.
And the breakaway finally getting caught with just under 19 kilometers left to go. Are you surprised to see Nedap Bandura at the front of the race right now?
You know what? There is nothing Nedap Bandura will ever do that will surprise me at this point. This team is incredibly aggressive. They have a lot of confidence. They bring the race out every single day they get in the bike race. They don't let the race come to them. I love the way that team races.
You think it's the holiday season still in Spain?
You do get that feeling looking at the beach, don't you?
What a dichotomy. You have the peace and serenity on one side, and then you have the outright focus on the road over here with 18 kilometers left to go, 3K away from an intermediate sprint point.
Right behind the single file stuff.
Nedap Bandura still with 2 riders at the front. Cannondale in the green, and then a smattering of other teams just behind them with the intermediate sprint point coming.
Basso. Well. Ivan Basso coming out to play. Getting that intermediate sprint.
And there's a few seconds available there to pick up at the intermediate sprint as well as the points. More bonus time at the finish, 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3, but the general classification riders really won't be in position on a stage like this to get into the top 3. It's more for the uphill finishes for them.
I like to see Ivan hungry like that.
And now some separation here, and Omega Pharma Quick Step rider off.
Indeed, it is Tony Martin. So Tony Martin looking for a little bit of action here. Basso made a little surge for that sprint. And Tony's saying, hey, you know what? Fabian may have beat me yesterday, and Fabian may have chased me down several days ago when I was off the front for 109 miles. But I've still got some legs.
Well, that move was unbelievable when he was the only man in the breakaway the entire stage. He got down to the final few kilometers. The gap came down to 5 seconds. Pretty much he maintained that gap. He actually extended it for a short time and then was only caught right at the finish line when Michael Morkov out-sprinted him because he was on the wheel of Fabian Cancellara, who launched his sprint from several hundred meters away.
Well, Tony Martin this time going with about 14, 15K to go. So very different. He's got a lot more chipper in those legs. He's won 9 time trials this year already, but this would be a massive win for the German 2-time world champion in the time trial. I'm not used to seeing him do moves like this very often. He does them once in a while, but this would be great for him.
Philippe Gilbert, the reigning world champion, is there near the front in the rainbow jersey, has Cannondale and other BMC teammates around him. And the red jersey of Vincenzo Nibali not there near the front, even though a few Espana riders, his teammates, are. But Tony Martin, maybe a little fresher this time. Just inside of 13 kilometers left to go. Was surprised to lose the time trial yesterday by the margin he did, over half a minute to Fabian Cancellara, but we now know that he's still suffering. In fact, he'll undergo surgery on the hand he broke in last year's Tour de France at the end of this season. The operation will take place at the end of October, right after the Tour of Beijing. And he'll have to wear a cast for 3 months while he heals. But in the meantime, he's racing.
He's not thinking about that wrist right now. That's for sure, that hand. And if you look at a guy like Tony, he wins stage races, but he wins those stage races by virtue of commanding time trial performances. He has not won a road race this year. So these are great things for a guy. When he goes out there, he strikes out. Nobody's expecting him to attack on a day like this. Down, and they immediately see that he is a clear and present danger off the front.
Now, Philippe Gilbert is still desperate for that first win as world champion in the rainbow jersey. He's got 2 teammates with him at the front of the field, desperately pursuing Tony Martin right now. It will get tricky near the finish.
Urban finish. They're trying to give the riders the benefit of the doubt.
And that's something unusual. Typically, it's the final 3K where you get the same time as the group you were in, but today it's 5 kilometers, so they're in that now.
So he is okay in his general classification bid. He should get the same time as the group he was with when he had that mechanical problem.
And it looked like he was with the main field, so he won't lose any time in the GC today. Field Almost single file here in the final 3.5 kilometers, and pretty quickly this is going to get interesting.
Those buildings providing a nice bit of shelter from the wind that's coming right off the water where these guys are right now. They're just right on the other side of the beach there.
You want to be in the top 3 there to have any chance. That's the 3K banner. Espana at the front, 2 riders leading the way, Orica Green Edge behind them. Michael Matthews is up there. Max Marchese for Lampre, Philippe Gilbert for BMC, 4 hours deep. And coming down to the finish along the Mediterranean coast in northeastern Spain today.
That wind starting to take its toll back in the peloton. You can see how strung out it is. And it's possible you could see a little bit of a snap here back in the peloton.
Well, Argo Shimano in the white jerseys coming to the front, riding for Ramon Sinkeldam today. They're a young team, not well schooled in the lead out, but they have some very fast riders, and they're coming up behind Garmin Sharp right now in the blue. Tyler Farah looking to get in position to win what would be his first Grand Tour stage since he won a stage in the first week of the Tour de France 2 years ago.
Alex Rasmussen, the man shepherding Farah toward the front of the group. He has one teammate up there with him.
Under 2 kilometers left. Nibali on the left-hand side of the road, riding near the front. Going to start to see those sharp corners coming up.
Those sharp corners and those sharp elbows. And here's that 180. Let's see how this plays in. Once again, if you're far back in this 180, it's really going to hurt your chances. Now it looks like Rasmussen on the front, so Tyler Farah's lead out, he's just about done. He's sitting about 6 wheels back, and he's just going to have to freelance it. Rasmussen looking back, making sure everything's okay.
Now he pulls off. Here comes Orica Green Edge through 2 riders at the front, followed by Katusha and Cannondale.
That's Simon Gerrans for Orica on the front, as he thinks that Matthews is the fastest pure sprinter in the bike race right now, and that's his teammate. And that was that little climb you were talking about, Steve. He just inside a 2K to go to get him up off of the coastline.
At the 1K banner, it'll start to level out somewhat. And there is the red kite, 1 kilometer, just over a half a mile from the finish of stage 12. Orica Green Edge at the front for Michael Matthews.
It's still a long way to the finish, and you look at this climb they're about to hit, this bump. They're going to carry most of their speed up it, but it'll take just a little bit of the sting, and the guys on the front might get swarmed.
Team Sky coming to the front. Edvald Boassenhagen looking for a stage win. Lotto Belisol up there as well. Single file near the front. With 500 meters left to go, there is a turn coming at the 300-meter mark as Philippe Gilbert works his way along the barriers on the right-hand side of the group.
Well, Philippe Gilbert's in a great spot. This could be his day.
Gilbert in the middle. Boassenhagen going for it. Up the gut for Team Sky. The Norwegian getting a gap on Gilbert as they come down towards the finish. 150 meters from the line. It's Boassenhagen out front. Gilbert on his wheel. Edvald Boassenhagen trying to hold off Gilbert. Here comes the world champion. And finally, on stage 12 of the Vuelta, Philippe Gilbert gets that elusive win in the rainbow jersey of world champion.
Booyah! The world champ gets the win on a day with a little uphill. Perfect for him. You saw him about 5th wheel when Henderson for Lotto Belisol was on the front drilling it. Philippe Gilbert timed it perfectly, but boy, he had to go hard to get across that gap to Boassenhagen.
It took him a while. It was a long and stressful pursuit, but Gilbert breaks through. He gets the win on stage 12. Gilbert getting the sprint win after having to close a gap on Edvald Boassenhagen.
It's Greg Henderson on the front right now, Gilbert on the left side of your screen, and it was Boassenhagen on the right, but Boassenhagen jumped early Gilbert, who just continued to fight and work to close it. And I tell you, it almost looked to me like Boassenhagen was going to ride away with it.
At this point, it looked like he had it, but boy, Gilbert really closed the gap quickly, have the speed, just enough uphill to take advantage of his skills. Unchanged, top four remain the same.